Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show and Transformation Talk Radio. This is Talk Radio to Thrive By. Thank you all for tuning us in and turning us on. Happy 2021. And already I could see the vibe started to shift already. Actually, it started to shift a bit in December. And especially if you're me and you pay attention to the signs. So that's what I've been looking at. I've been like, okay, how's that working? Is that working? Is that not working? What's easier now than it's been? And it's been fascinating for me when I think about this. But let me give a shout out to Mr. B. Hello, Mr. B.
Hi there, Pat, and Happy New Year to you as well. And the fam, the crew there, everyone.
Yeah. So, Benny, how was the new year for you?
Pretty good. I just kind of hung out, stayed in place, did the quieter version. There it was virtually sent on the TV there. The Seattle Space Needle did their virtual thing, which was kind of cool, actually. And I'm glad they did it. It was a really good turnout.
It was a really good turnout. It was really different, right?
Because everyone stayed hopefully at home and did their thing. So
yeah,
great turnout.
Well, look, I mean, one of the things that I love is the level of creativity that people have basically shown and demonstrated. But the other thing that I am fascinated by is how people have gone to a place of these spiritual moments, these moments that we reflect on. And I'm really struck by them in a lot of different ways. I'm watching some really interesting things. I mean, because of the business I'm in and you're in and we're in media, we try to stay in touch with what's going on in the world, right? We try to at least stay on the edge of it to make sure we're, if our guest brings something up, we're at least plugged in. But one of the things I'm really struck by is, what does it mean to savor life's spiritual moments? And when I thought back on this past year, 2020, there were many, many, many moments that I could point to where this transmutation from anxiety and stress and depression into a sense of freedom, into almost magical energy shift. And the question really does become, what does it mean to savor these life spiritual moments? That's why I have my very special guest joining me here today, Colleen. I say Foye Bollen, but I probably will get corrected on that. Joining me here today, who is the author of a book exactly about that, but also a body of work, life's work. When we're talking about savoring life's spiritual moments, we get to talk about what that means and really step into that place. So today with Colleen, we're going to take a journey and we're going to step into this space where I wonder if you too can hold on to these moments, can remember these moments. And if you cannot, hopefully you will hear something today from this book that's filled with backstories and filled with exercises and filled with information about how attitude versus circumstances is so important. And many of you have heard me talk about Viktor Frankl, one of my heroes. Somebody gave me his book many, many years ago, and now I understand why. They were saying, hey, Baccili, learn something. But today, let's take a journey with Colleen. Colleen, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Oh, thank you. It's a joy to be on.
I want to ask you about spiritual moments. I want to talk about this because I think that they may mean different things to different people. Like you just heard me use it in reference to my experience in 2020. But the way that you talk about the alchemy of transforming everyday experiences into life-changing events is so critical for the time we live in. Let's talk about what this has come to mean for you and how important it is today.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think of the spiritual moments as magical moments that are just scattered throughout the day. And it's almost like there's this daily Easter egg hunt. and all these jewels are hidden around, and I can find them or not. But if I pay attention and I find them, I have these little bursts of joy throughout my day. And I see those magical moments, those little jewels, as coming from the divine, from the source, from spirit, whatever name that you give that being, that power. So for me, that is a lot of what those spiritual moments are about. And I think when I can personally bring them together, and when other people I know do that, that it brings a peace of mind. And just being able to be calmer inside oneself is such a powerful thing to be able to create.
Let's talk about this for a minute in the context of sometimes, at least for me in my journey, and thank you for, really addressing that question. But the thing I want to ask you about, and this has been a misconception for me, I started this 16 years ago, not thinking about what I would be doing 16 years in the future or what things would mean. But what I learned along the way is that if I look at what other people define as a spiritual moment, I may or may never get to experience it. How personal is it for people to really seek and find their own spiritual moments, as opposed to borrowing somebody else's and thinking that's what I have to shoot for?
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it kind of starts back a step, that people need to have a little bit of quietness in their lives in order to tune into that inner voice or their gut, wherever they get their true messages from. And from there, they can kind of find out what their lexicon, what their alphabet, what their way of noticing and enjoying spiritual moments is. And then just paying attention to how things resonate in their bodies. So I was out walking in the rain the other day, pouring rain, and I noticed on this side there was a puddle, and little bubbles kept popping up in the bubbles in the water. And to me, that was pretty magical. And so I just stopped and I watched the bubbles popping for a moment. And for me, that was a small spiritual moment that brought me joy. And so for other people, that may not be the thing at all. But in order to find out what it is, they need to kind of know their inner self a little bit in order to discover what's going to bring them joy and what's going to feel like a spiritual moment and a spiritual connection.
I was reading about you and about your own spiritual journey, and it's so much of what I read parallels a little bit of my own. And I find it interesting that both of us are here and talking about spirituality or spiritual journey, and what that has come to mean in the world. I happen to live in a city or a state, however you want to. When the last survey was taken on what is the most religious city, what is the most spiritual city, our city came out to be the least religious and the most spiritual, like number one on the chart. And it got me to thinking, what does that mean exactly? And then when I looked at the diversity we have here in practices. Everything from my background of Southern Baptist stepmom to a spiritual center that people classified as New Age. I mean, we've got it. Do you think people are searching to find something that fits them so that they can fully express these spiritual moments without shame, without guilt, without thinking, oh my gosh, I shouldn't experience that? What do you think?
Right. Well, I'm also in Seattle, and so we're in the same environment.
Yeah.
And I was just reading, it's kind of connected to our pandemic experience and to spirituality. But just, I think it was yesterday in the BBC News, they had an article saying that at this particular time, people are really focusing in on their spirituality, people who haven't been before. And part of that is because they have time. and they can go online and they can not have to interact with people and make a decision of, yes, I want to be here, or yes, I want to be there. But they can just kind of flit around to different services and see what fits and what doesn't, what they like, what they don't. So I think this is a really powerful time across the globe for people to be turning inward, partly because we can't turn outward, depending on where you live. But, here in Washington State, we're pretty restricted in what we can do. But it gives us this great opportunity to have that rich internal life that maybe in other times we were too busy to pay attention to.
When I was reading your book, one of the things I was struck by, well, two things in particular. Of course, I was struck by the conversation on joy, although it's never really been my path. Joy has never been the leading, how should I say it, the leading energy for me. Only because I think for the most part, that is something I had to fully experience and understand because I didn't have a basis for it. But I really glommed on to your words and your message in both gratitude and inspiration. And I couldn't separate them in my mind. I know they're separate in the book, but in my mind and in my experience, I was thinking about these and I was reading some of the stories, especially miracles happening all around us. And I wanted to ask you about what you find now. What you find now is what is the most significant point of awareness? For example, when I was reading this, I was really struck by something that I reflected on: synchronicity. I thought about this over and over again, and I could pretty much write a book and pinpoint everything that's happened to me positively as a synchronized moment. For you, is there an aha moment that came to you as a result of writing this book?
That's a very good question. This book it's kind of like I had indicated at the beginning of the show, it's kind of a lifetime book. I wrote it over about 12 years. And so there were many different periods I went through. My kids kind of grew up in the time that I was writing the book. And I think for me, the process of being willing to publish the book, I'm a very private person. And to find that, I would, for myself, I call it bravery, to be able to have anybody, see my interior world. To be able to get to that point was very powerful, where I was like, okay, I can do this now. There were many times before I thought about publishing it and I was like, whoa, no, I'm not ready. And now I was. So that was kind of like a big internal step of, why not share? I mean, I love when people share their lives. I love when you tell stories about your life. I think that's a very powerful thing to do. And why would I not want to be in that group of people sharing?
Yeah. And I'm like you. People don't think this about me because of what I do, right? I too am a how should I say, a very private person. I mean, I think Benny will tell you. Benny and I have been together now, this is going on 17 years, but it took me, like a lot of years before I even shared about the chronic illness that I was experiencing. And then I talked about it in the way I was experiencing it. For example, had it not been for this radio show and the ability to keep paying for airtime, to keep this message going, I don't know if I would have got through what was going on in my body. I don't know if I'd have been or had access to the resources that were in front of me. And what I love about reading your book is it got me to think. Now, let me ask you this. I want to talk to you about this when we come back from break. Many folks say, yeah, but wow, this is such a rough year. I mean, did you really find these spiritual moments? Did you really find this way to transform or create some alchemy in your life? And when we come back, I want to talk about the formula for this. And I call it a formula because the way that you laid this out in the book is if we could experience at least one instance of every chapter of this book, we could literally transform the worst of the worst energies. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back with my very special guest today. Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome back. This is the Dr. Pat Show's Talk Radio to Thrive By. Hey, you know what, Benny.
Yeah. What's up?
You know what somebody asked me? This is a really interesting question because I want to talk to Colleen about it. Because it has to do with introspection. So somebody said to me, you know, Pat, we know you're not going to change the name of your show, the Dr. Pat Show, right? Because that's the show. And you also do Power Up. Now you're also doing the Psychic and the Doc with Mark Anthony. Then you also have Lime Talk Radio. And you know, like, and somebody asked me this really interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever wanted to change your tagline to the show?
Nah.
That's what I said. It's like, wrong answer.
You send
Wrong
those
answer.
people to me, I'll tell them.
Huh? And you know, it's interesting. I'm talking to Colleen here today. And by the way, Colleen, thank you for joining me here today. And I'm reading her book. And we're going to talk about this, Benny, because there's gratitude, right? It's exactly like I'm talking about, right? There's gratitude. And then you talk about inspiration. But in the back, right? She keeps us waiting for the punchline in the back. This is my 2 cents. She talks about introspection. And when somebody asked, I had 2 people ask me that question in the past 2 weeks, Benny, because they know we're rebranding. And I almost had a moment where I thought, and then I said, yeah. So we're going to get to that right now. Colleen, please tell folks, one, how do they find out about you? How do they get a copy of the book? And then Benny, let's go ahead and give a copy of the book away. 1-800-930-2819. All right. How do they find out about you and how do they get their own copy?
Okay. Well, the name of my book is Savoring Life's Spiritual Moments, The Alchemy of Transforming Everyday Experiences into Life-Changing Events. It's available on Amazon and through independent bookstores. People can learn more about me at my website, which is Colleen, Foye, Bollen.com.
I gave you a French name, Foye.
Yeah, and it's Irish.
But I'll go with Foye. And when everybody you go over to the book, I want you to also notice something else here about Colleen, because this is what I was really struck by. And we're going to talk about the book in a hot second, but take a look at the artwork. Just you'll see at the top, there's a tab here and you can click on books artwork, which we're going to talk about in a hot minute here, because there's some special meaning in this. And we're going to tie it all together. I'm going to save my question about the color of your website for a minute. I'm going to hold off on that because I love it. I love it. Colleen, look, I want to talk about a couple of things. And I do want to talk about the connection between, and let's start out with this, my connection with inspiration, gratitude, inspiration, and introspection. I have no idea why I pulled those 3 out. But funny, as I'm reading your book, I came across a little, what do you call them? Subchapter yeah. In the book, which I think really addresses those 3 things. And I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to put you on the spot. And I'm going to ask you to talk about this right now. Luck versus attitude.
Yeah.
Whoa. Why did you put that in the book? Because that is like, so I've never heard anybody refer to luck and attitude together. Tell me about that. And how is that important in the world we live in today?
Well, for me, it kind of came about when I went on a trip with my kids, and this story is in the book. We went to Vancouver, BC, and I was on an assignment to evaluate different places kids could go in Vancouver, and then it was going to be in a book. It was pouring rain that day. I mean, just pouring rain. It was a bad start to the trip. We got stopped by the police on the way up there because I was in the wrong lane. And then we were supposed to go to a hike. It was washed out. We were supposed to go to an attraction. It was closed because of the rain. We tried to go to a restaurant. The parking lot was flooded. There were problems at our hotel. I mean, everything was wrong. And we just kept laughing more and more. And then we went to Science World kind of as a thank you for, all we had been through. And we had a fun time playing with the experiments. And when we left, the car had been, the window of the car had been smashed in and somebody stole our luggage. And this was like at the end of like 7 things had already gone seriously wrong. And we just kept laughing. I mean, we laughed the whole way home. It's like our favorite trip. And I was like, well, why is that? I was telling somebody about it. And she said, that sounds horrible. What are you laughing about? And I went, oh, I had a choice here. So it kind of like I had the experience and then I had the realization. And then I said, I want more of that. So, if I have this power, I want to use it.
And, I referenced Viktor Frankl earlier. And, what very few people know is somebody gave me Viktor Frankl's first book. And obviously they wanted me to learn something from it. Well, that book and many others, but the message in that book transformed my life. And I think that's what you're saying here too. We're looking at things that happen in our lives on a regular basis, but the secret, or how should I say it, the miraculous power of what you just described is such a game changer. What does it take for us to learn how to do this? Because I do think you do have to learn it.
I think, I think awareness is the key for any change that a person wants to make in their lives. I have stories in my book about the inner critic. I had a horrible, mean inner critic. And I'm not saying she's totally gone, but she has calmed down quite a bit. But I had to be aware of her first because she was always there. And so I didn't notice that it was something I had any say over. I thought that negative voice was just something everybody lived with. And then slowly for me, it was through meditation, but I'm sure other people could find other ways to that point. I had like a moment of peace and I was like, oh, I can have peace. I can have peace of mind. How can I extend that out and have that be more than a second? How can I have it be 10 seconds or, maybe a whole minute in the day? But if I didn't have the awareness first that I had an issue, then I have no way to solve it. Why would I want to solve a problem that I don't know that I have? Yeah.
We're going to take another short break. And when we come back, we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so talking about some of the, what I like to say, some of the go-to action items that people can implement right away, that people can do in their lives right away. And when we come back, one of the things we're going to talk about right out of the gate, I mean, like right out of the gate, the power of words. And many of you know, Benny knows this, many of you know that we did an experiment a number of years ago. Wow, like more than a number of years ago. And what we did was we did a audio sound wave experiment with words. And we went through for a minute and we did a minute of what we would call positive words and a minute of what you would call negative words. And when we compared them, for example, good versus bad, and you looked at the sound wave, what you found was incredible. And it didn't matter if it was my voice or somebody else's voice. The energetic sound wave of itself, high vibration, low vibration, it was shocking. When we come back, the power of words is more than the power of words. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's so great to have all of you tune us in and turn us on. I am so thrilled to have Colleen Foye Bollen joining me here today. And of course, the book is Savoring Life's Spiritual Moments, The Alchemy of Transforming Everyday Experience into Life-Changing Events. But also, we're going to also talk about, this segment, we're going to talk about words, but we're also going to talk about imagery as well, especially the imagery in the book. Before we do that, Colleen, what is the best way for people to find out more about you and get their own copy of the book?
My book is available through Amazon and through independent bookstores. And people can get in touch with me at my website, which is ColleenFoyeBollen.com.
And I want to spell Foye for all of you out there. It's Foye, just so everybody knows. Benny, one more copy of the book. Let's do it. 1-800-930-2819. And for those of you out there, if you have questions, please feel free to call in as well, and we will see if we can help you. Colleen, I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things, but I really zoomed in on what you were writing about the power of words. Now, I tend to link words and imagery together, but they're not necessarily. But let's talk about your reference in this book, especially when we're talking about introspection, because I found this fascinating that we're looking at power of words in the section of the book where you talk about introspection, because sometimes when we look back or we look within, our self-talk, it's devastating. Yeah. I'm fascinated why you put it in this section of the book and how powerful that is at the same time. What does this mean for you here?
Well, I've used words. I kind of began journaling, probably in my 20s. And I was just a constant journaler. I never thought it would lead to writing. It was a way of processing my thinking. So for me, it was a way to go inside, and I almost didn't know what I thought until I either put it on paper or I spoke it to somebody in words. But just within my own mind, I oftentimes couldn't figure out. So I needed a tool that I could use as a kind of introspection, divination tool to find out even what I was personally thinking myself, and to clarify it for myself. And then the story that I have about it in the book is about my roommate, who always believed in the power of words and would say, if she has a headache and she tells 5 people, they each get a little bit of her headache and she feels better. And now they've done research and it says that, yeah, that can work.
It does. What is the expression? Misery loves company. Right? I mean, isn't that an expression? I mean, and it really is, it gets contagious. But don't you find also that, running into people that, what is the expression? Somebody said to me, Pat, how do you see this? Do you see, this is really a number of years ago, like decades ago, somebody said, what do you think? Is the glass half empty and half full? And I said, it's neither. It's overflowing. It's not half of anything. What's the idea of a half a glass? I don't get that. Right. And so it's an interesting thing. And here's the thing. Someone also said to me, Colleen, you're either born with it or you're not. Now, I don't believe that's true. How can we help people take an action today to step into the energy of shift, of change, of the alchemy that you talk about?
Mm-hmm. I think baby steps. So as I said in the beginning, awareness, and ways to get awareness are just taking like little moments, like between an inhale and an exhale, just for, that not even a whole second, and just focus inward. If you're going somewhere and you park your car, before you get out, to take a moment to just go inward. And you might want to then start expanding out those moments. I have a lot of exercises in my book about ways that people can tune inward and listen to that inner voice and get guidance about their lives that way. because that would be one step, and that's kind of a mindfulness attitude technique. And then just when you're going around your everyday life, if you see something that you like something you bought on a trip, and it brings back that memory, instead of just looking at it, say, wow, thank you, thank you for, reminding me of that time when I got to, go to the Grand Canyon or to Europe or, whatever. And just appreciating those little moments and not letting them just pass by. When I used to go for walks before the pandemic, I would just stroll along. And now when I see something that tickles me or seems interesting, I stop and I turn and I look at it. And it only takes a little while, but I kind of then, absorb it more, and it gives me more joy and more happiness to spend that moment with that delightful thing, whether it's a flower or the bubbles in the street that I was talking about earlier. So I think those are the ways, just little playful ways. It doesn't need to be hard or work or anything like that. I think people can delve into this in really enjoyable ways. Doodling is one of the stories that I have in there.
Yeah. And let's talk about this, because we're always in the energy of ourselves. We're
Yes.
always in the energy of ourselves. So let's just talk about that for a moment, and so when are we not in the energy of ourselves? Let me give you a moment and have you commented on it. We're not in the energy of ourselves when we're in the energy of somebody else. And one of the most powerful prayers or messages that I came across, like over 30 years ago, is the Serenity Prayer. It's one of the simplest prayers on the planet. And basically one of the more difficult ones, right? God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can. And now here's the kicker: wisdom to know the difference. See, that's the kicker, right? I might be able to change this, but I can't change this, but I keep getting plugged into wanting to change this. So your book is addressing the power that we have to change within. Boy, if there was ever a time for us to learn this, it's really now. Did you know you were going to write this book for this time we're living in now?
No, wouldn't that be something? I would have bought a stock in Zoom, wouldn't I?
Oh boy. I thought about it and I didn't do it. Yeah, I thought about it. That's funny. If you think back, and I would like you to think about this for a minute before we go to break. You included art in the book, and earlier I said this. I said I tend to put the power of words and the power of imagery together in my mind, right? I mean, I have a hard time disconnecting them, probably because I have this learning difference thing that I don't actually see words. Every word I see an image. I don't actually see a word. So if you say the word talk, I don't see TALK. I see a mouth going like this. Great later on in school for adult learning, maybe a thesis, really good for that. Not good to pass statistics, really not good. But imagery, you've included imagery in the book. Tell us about the power of that.
Yeah. Well, the images I used are just everyday things. Like one of them is coleus plant. And then I work with it in a digital darkroom, and I turn it into a kaleidoscope. And for me, that is the same process I'm doing with everyday spiritual moments. I'm taking an ordinary thing like, a stapler, and I'm being grateful that it has staples in it, and so I'm changing my attitude about it. I'm not just seeing it as, something that sits on my desk. I'm seeing as, something that I can be grateful that it works and it does what I need it to do. And also, I also have other images in there that are all ordinary things. And it's just that, that tiny shift, and we can do that with our perspective. We can do that with our attitude.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the reason behind putting in those images. And if people go to my website, they'll see the before picture and then the kaleidoscope picture. And even on the back cover, I have just one example so people could see where I have a picture of a glass sculpture and then what it looks like when it's kaleidoscoped, so people can see that transformation. Yeah, and so for me, like you were saying, you know, it's bringing together the visual with the attitude and with all of the other processes that we go through when we're thinking and deciding how we want to be in the world.
You know, it's interesting. Let's talk about kaleidoscope when we come back from break, because I have always been fascinated by kaleidoscope. You know, when you're a kid, well, not now, but when you're now, you get a 3D thing. But when we were growing up, we always were fascinated by these little kaleidoscope things we were getting to look at. But there's a fascination with this, which is a symmetry, so to speak. And, you know, symmetry is another way to look at multiple sides of things, right? When we come back, I want to talk with you about here we are today. Here we are today. What would be your top 3 tips for people to take away from this show to implement in their lives today? Your top 3. But I'm going to take a break. So when we come back, you have a little time to think about it. Let's take a short break, everybody. Benny, we'll be right back. Benny.
Yes.
He's so good, Benny.
Well, thank you.
Kaleidoscope. Oh, okay. We're going to talk about. I asked Colleen. I put her on the spot, so we're going to get her top 3. But Benny, I want you to think about this.
Okay.
21 years ago, almost to this day. 21 years ago, almost to this day.
Yeah, the big switch over
was one of the most gut-wrenching songs ever sung, or written, or produced. Most gut-wrenching ever done. The words, beyond the words, struck people like a knife in the heart. I want you to guess which one it is. Maybe you can play it later. Colleen, thank you for joining me here today. And the reason I bring up the songs, and Benny's 21 years ago, there was a song that came out. Benny, I'll give you a tip. It was written by Prince, but Prince didn't sing it. 21 years ago.
too easy now.
Wait, no, 31 years ago. Dang, 31, not 21, 31 years ago. We hang on to this stuff, right? Now, we got a lot to hang on to if we want to for 2020, but I need your help, your top 3. Help us release me from myself.
Well, one of the things we were talking about during the break is it's kind of a rewrite of the Serenity Prayer. And I guess that would be number 1. And it's, God, grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the ones I can, and the wisdom to know that one is me. And so basically, you know, focusing in on ourselves and not, you know, trying to change other people. One of the images that I've heard is to imagine ourselves having a hula hoop, you know, the circle of plastic around us, and everything inside our hula hoop, that's our business. That's what we can, you know, we can deal with that part. But things that are outside our hula hoop, you know, people are doing silly, crazy things, that isn't necessarily our business. So my second one would be gratitude, because in this year we had so many things taken away or shifted. And so to be in gratitude for what we have, or to what we have found within our new lives. Like for me, I tended to be a person who kind of ran around a lot, and, you know, needing to be home and to be quiet. Well, one, it helped me get my book published, which, hooray, I was very grateful for that.
Yeah.
But it also allowed me just to sink into quietness and, you know, and let's see, number 3, I think would be fun. I think it's really important to have, joy and fun in our lives, no matter if it's playing a game with our family. A lot of people are doing puzzles these days, listening to things on YouTube.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of storytelling, and it's just fun to hear stories about people's lives. And so I think those would be my
Yeah.
top three.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. One of the things too is, people say this as well, and I thank you so much for this. And by the way, in your book, you give us a lot of things to do, right? You really do. I want to jump to one very important thing, which I pulled out of the book. And I think you call it a miracle. I think let's talk about miracles because I rely on them. And I don't mean miraculous things I mean everyday miracles. There are everyday miracles, right, that happen. But I've also had some amazing what I call miracles happen in life. I see them when I'm plugging into the right things. Unlike that song I just referenced that came out January 8th, 1990. Benny, did you figure it out? I just gave you the answer, right? One of the saddest, gut-wrenching songs that affected me personally in 1990. To this day, I cannot listen to this song without going back to that moment in my life. How do we remember 2020 but not relive it?
Yeah, I see the power of doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's, where we put our focus.
Mhm.
So, a lot has happened this year, in our political world, in our health world, in people's work lives, school. And so, for me, finding, and it doesn't have to be like major positive. It can be small
Yeah.
things like, instead of going out to eat, I, learned how to cook, or instead of getting in my car to go places, I had time to walk and to see things better. I had time to maybe Zoom connect with people that I wouldn't have done otherwise, in the storytelling world, we're connected, all around the US, around the world. I've been on calls where people, it was 4 continents of people coming together.
Yeah.
And the power of that, that we're all there together doing the same thing together. And I think if we, realize that, we can build on it, because gratitude and joy, they're quantum equations. And the more that we bring it into our world, the more it's out in the world. And the more people that do that, we're really pooling it together. And so we can look back on this year, and look at those amazing things that have happened.
And I think that is, for me, it's a great way to go full circle in our conversation today. And, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today, Colleen. Please give out your website again. And then I'd love to know your personal message, what you'd like to leave us with today. And thank you for all you do.
Okay. My personal website is www.colleenfoyebollen.com. And you can reach me at there, and you can get my book on Amazon or through independent bookstores.
And what's your personal message? What would you like to leave us with today?
The main thing I would like to leave people with is to have grace for themselves and for other people. As we've discussed in this show, we're all going through some very trying times. And we may not look like we're doing the best we can. And yet everybody is, doing the best they can in that situation, in that moment. And it just kind of, softens the edges of this kind of hard situation that we are now in.
Yeah.
And just, instead of yelling at somebody who's driving erratically, send them a blessing and wish them, you know, a safe trip. And, you know, they're just small ways that we can just, you know, put out positivity and grace. I just love that word.
I'm with you on that. And I'll tell you, we're not going anywhere. We're going to keep doing the vibe of Thrive right here on the Dr. Pat Show, Transformation Talk Radio and the Transformation Network. Let's take a short break. Colleen, you rock. And that song, of course, was Sinead O'Connor. Nothing Compares to You, written by Prince. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back.